Hey, it's Bryan Law from Press for Truth, and today I'd just like to talk a little bit about the news of the impending invasion of Syria that's echoing a lot of memories of what happened in Iraq back in 2003. CNN, the Pentagon's official media arm, released the other day information that revealed that the military, U.S., Britain, and France are currently training freedom fighters and resistance fighters in Syria to stand up against the al-Assad regime. So the Pentagon stated that American, French, and British troops are currently working with their special forces on the ground to prepare a plan for an invasion where they could have troops on the ground in Syria in a matter of hours if they needed to. And they're actually preparing the country of Jordan that borders Syria for any sort of conflict that might boil over into its country. So there's a steady pace of trying to destabilize this part of the region, because it's rich in oil, it's rich in resources, and they want to control all of those resources in that particular area of the world. And it's no different than the buildup that we're seeing going on with a war effort, an invasion effort to go into Iran, and the one that we saw in 2003 with the buildup into the war in Iraq. And it's just the same process over and over again. They use humanitarian reasons as the agenda for their world police under the guise of NATO, saying that we need to go in, we need to protect these people because the government in power isn't protecting them. Then they end up going in and millions of citizens and civilians get slaughtered by the NATO forces that go in and just bomb the country. And after it's said and done, they just instill some sort of a Bilderberg-controlled ruler in the country that then upholds certain types of policies that are beneficial to these elites, these royals of the world, if you will. The current ruling power elites in Syria, the al-Assad regime, he took over from his father, who has been ruling the country since the 70s. Ever since 1963, the country really hasn't had any sort of constitutional rights for its citizens and has just been ruled by oligarchs that have been placed in there by the global elite. Now, this just brings memories back of what happened in Iraq, and actually, if we go back even further, you can look at the same pattern of events happening in Libya. It happened in Bosnia before the invasion there in 1999, the NATO-backed invasion, and it also happened most famously in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen freedom fighters back in the 80s. This upcoming invasion of Syria, under the guise of humanitarian reasons, is largely backed by the Bilderberg Group, and there were some important people at that meeting this year that have a direct relation to what's going to happen in Syria. The Bilderberg Group and its allies in the military and in the government, they have a history of funding these types of freedom fighter groups and resistance groups, and later on they turn into the enemies that we then have to go and fight in different wars. If we look back into the late 1970s and the 80s, you had the Mujahideen freedom fighters in Afghanistan that were at war with Russia at that time, and they were being funded and backed by the Central Intelligence Agency at that time. After their usefulness wore out, the Mujahideen freedom fighters then became a terrorist organization that we're now at war with. This pattern of continuously setting up countries for invasion after invasion is nothing more than imperialism. We've seen it for thousands of years, where they're trying to set up their own empire of countries all over the world, and once they send troops into those countries, those troops don't leave. I mean, all of the troops that left Iraq, well, there's still a lot of military bases there, and they're going to be there forever now. They basically go in, overthrow a country, get the rulers out that they don't like, instill their own Bilderberg rulers, and then maintain control of that country's wealth and power. Things never get better for the people in the country, but the propaganda machine will lead you to believe that they are getting better for the people. And as more and more troops come back from places like Iraq and Afghanistan, they're left with nothing really to do. So now they're trying to ramp up the domestic terrorism efforts at home. You see it all over the place in the United States as well, where the U.S. Department of Homeland Security is now using these military drones, these unmanned drones, to fly around and monitor people. And they're going to be using them in South America now to try and stop some of the drug trade, which is controlled and operated by the Central Intelligence Agency anyways. And if you guys want an interesting book to read, I'm actually going through and reading this book right now by Daniel Estulin called Shadow Masters. It's a follow-up to his book, The True Story of the Bilderberg Group. It's a really great book, a lot of good information on there, and I'm kind of reading through it to get a little bit of information that we can add into the Bilderberg film that we're working on right now. So I'll leave you guys with that for today. Go and pick up Daniel Estulin's books. Great books, tons of amazing information in there, and he's got all the documents to back it up in the back of the book. So I'll leave you guys with that, and until next time, keep fighting the good fight.